To our strategic plan, and at this time I'll turn to the leader of our strategic planning team, Dr. James Ford. Dr. Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm James E. Ford, grateful to be in company of the rest of our board members again. As stated by Mr. Chair, our strategic planning committee wishes to provide an update on our next steps, specifically regarding the North Carolina State Board strategic plan. As you may know, during November there was a planning and work session, and as a result of that, during the recent planning committee prep meeting, some feedback was sifted through and reviewed, and so we have Dr. Maria Petrie-Martin to offer some of that information and to take questions. Dr. Petrie-Martin.
Good afternoon to the State Board, to the State Superintendent, all those assembled. It is an honor to be with you today to really provide feedback from the planning and work session in November and to discuss some of the next steps that will include a collaborative process of staff across the department to give additional feedback and recommendations. First of all, we want to acknowledge that the goals of the strategic plan have remained the same. So the goal of eliminating opportunity gaps between students by 2025, improving school and district performance by 2025, and increasing educator preparedness to meet the needs of every child by 2025 still remain intact. So during the November planning and work session, the focus was strictly on objectives and components under these particular goals. So today I will be reviewing the feedback from that planning and work session, as I said, providing next steps, and then discussing some of the assumptions regarding these goals, objectives, and components as we move to the next step in the process. So what we have done during that planning and work session is that we had an activity in which we broke up into groups, and the groups included our state board members as well as our DPI staff, and we were fortunate to have local superintendents from across the state with us as well, who broke up into groups around each of the three goals that I just stated. We had an activity in which we asked them to look at the objectives and the components and mark them as green, yellow, or red. Of course, during today's presentation, none of the green items will be shared with you because those items were designated as items that have metrics that are clearly quantifiable, and they are already included in the current State Board of Education dashboard. So then we proceeded to ask additional questions regarding why would something be yellow and why would it be green, or red, I should say. So for yellow, we asked whether or not the metric for that objective was something that was quantifiable and at least in part could be operationalized through data with some work to define that data or the metrics. So keep that in mind as we start off looking at the first set of items, which were yellow. We have the data, but it appears we might need more work to define the data. So the first item that showed up in yellow during that activity was Objective 1 under Goal 1, and this was to decrease the number of exclusionary discipline practices by subgroup, specifically suspensions and expulsions. Some of the comments that we received included providing resources for alternatives to disciplinary consequences, providing training to teachers and administrators, and defining what we mean by disruptive behaviors. The next item that showed up as yellow under Goal 1 was Objective 2, which was to improve school climate measures across all schools and grade levels. And the two components under that included increasing the number of school-based mental health professionals and increasing the opportunities to develop healthy habits for our students. Though it was in yellow, we did not receive any additional comments. This will again be discussed in our work group, but I at least wanted to share that with you. The next item that was in yellow under Goal 1 was Objective 3, increasing the percentage of 4-year-old children enrolled in state pre-K from 22% to 34%. And we had a couple of comments here. One included considering changing the language to include increasing the education of parents regarding these opportunities. And the question was asked, well, which data could show this increase? And actually, there is data currently that does show that. So as we work as a work group, we will make those connections. The next item that was in yellow under Goal 1 was Objective 4, and this was decreasing the high school dropout rate for each subgroup. And the question that was asked is, how does discipline data play into this item? So making a connection with that objective with discipline. And then the other item in yellow was Component 2, which was increasing access, readiness, and attainment for a lot of these post-secondary opportunities. And the question was asked, what is the readiness data? And do we have readiness data that tells us if students were ready for these programs? Under Goal 2, we had a few yellow items. One was Objective 1, allocating financial, business, and technology resources according to state and federal law and state board policies. And the comment here was simply, we really need to review and assess the laws and policies that govern the resource of allocations to determine the impact of school and district performance. So this was more of a request to put this as part of this work. The next item under Goal 2 that was in yellow was Objective 7, Component 1, which dealt with increasing the number of schools meeting or exceeding growth measured by subgroup. And Component 1 specifically discussed schools with charter-like flexibilities, and they listed those categories. And what was stated was we could delete the component and just focus on all schools in this particular category. Okay. And then next under Goal 2, in yellow was Objective 8, increasing the number of charter schools meeting or exceeding academic, operational, and financial goals. And it was recommended we use the terminology increase the number of PSUs meeting or exceeding operational or financial goals. And also in goal number 2, Objective 9 was in yellow, and this was increasing the number of qualified and well-prepared principals in every school. And it was recommended that this be increasing the number of effective principals based on test data, school-wide data, and other multiple measures. Okay. And we have one more that received yellow, and this was Objective 2, to increase the number of mentors available to beginning educators. And the comment here was, how do we define mentors? Districts have mentor data. Do we have that data? What does it tell us, and what do we know about it? Or questions. And also for this one, there was a connection made with the Pathways work to determine how do we fold in the work with the Pathways to Teaching Excellence as part of this objective as well. So we had a few items that were in red, and we'll highlight those for you. And just to remind us of why things were designated as red, for red, the objectives or the components were not easily quantified, and the data did not appear to be available. That was how we posed the question, and that's how it was determined if it was read by the subgroups. So we had under Goal 1, we had Component 1, increasing the average composite score on state-mandated college entrance exams. And we know many of our schools are not doing those at this time, so that was raised as a question, which was Objective 5, which has become an inactive item. And decreasing the number of students taking remedial courses in college was questioned as well. Is that truly a measure that we want to use here? And then Objective 6, increasing the number of educators of color in schools across North Carolina. didn't get comments even though they were put in red. So the work group will be looking at these to make sure we have the data to support these and then bringing back that information to the board. Okay. Next item that was read under Goal 3 was Objective 1, increasing the number of culturally relevant, equity-focused resources for educators. The comment that was given is this is conceptual and we don't have data currently being collected. Objective 3, strengthening the relationships between educator prep programs, districts, and schools to foster collaboration and better teaching practice. The comment was this is aspirational, and geography could limit this. Therefore, it could be an equity issue for our school districts. And then the next objective that received a red status was the increased opportunities for educator engagement inside and outside of the school. And the question was asked, well, how would this be defined and what is the purpose of the engagement? So that is a quick overview of all of the feedback that was taken in during the planning and work session. And now, this information has already been shared and will be further discussed with a work group of staff here at the Department of Public Instruction. We hope that this work group will inform our next steps for the dashboard phase 2, and then also to provide you all with feedback that includes certain data elements, data availability, use cases, priorities, and then dissemination of all of this work once it is completed. And we know the purpose for this work is to inform any changes that we feel might be warranted based on the feedback, based on available data, or even based on new data that we have now that maybe we didn't have in 2019. Connecting these components to the comprehensive remedial plan with those metrics of the dashboard, and then hopefully to improve and disseminate information for the dashboard is all a purpose of this work as well. For the next slide, it's small and you can't see all of their names, but this is the entire work group from here at DPI and all of the offices that will be represented in helping us to look at some of the yellow and red items and bring back information to this board. As you go to the next slide, we just wanted you to know some of the guiding principles that we shared with this work group as they begin their work. We talked about considerations such as the ability to disaggregate any data based on subgroups. So as we try to determine if data is available for some of these red or yellow items, do we have the ability to disaggregate it? Are there any limitations of the existing data that we currently have? Do we need to rephrase any of the objectives or the components to align with the available data that we have? And are there any other data elements that may be more relevant and available? And in all honesty, the work group talked about post-COVID, we have different data points, and you all heard about a lot of data today that might be beneficial to this process now versus when it was started in 2019. And next we have our immediate next steps, which was to present here to the state board regarding that feedback. And during the month of January, the work group will be meeting. They will be giving us input to some of these objectives and metrics that were discussed today. We're going to be organizing that input from that work group and creating a draft presentation for the board for the February meeting. And then we're also continuing to determine whether and how to disaggregate that data. That's going to be a reoccurring theme as we look at all of the data pieces for these objectives and components. And then discuss feedback. We eventually want to get this to our PSUs, get feedback from them as well, and then discuss the dissemination process. You know, at the November planning and work session, one of the things we discussed is what is the real purpose for this dashboard? What is the real purpose for this information? And so as a work group, we started to continue to clarify that discussion. And you can see some of the things that we have discuss things like providing the state board, local school boards, local, state, and district policymakers with a tool to identify and track the state board's priorities, providing metrics, reviewing whether PSUs are making progress towards certain state board priorities, informing decisions, problem solving, and also identifying opportunities to collaborate with groups. So these are all things that we think could serve as purposes for audiences across the state for this work. We also talked about what this dashboard does not do, and we talked about the fact that it is not a tracking system for organizational performance. It doesn't suggest any direct or indirect links to state board policies, though at some point I think it would be helpful to link policies to much of the goals and objectives, and then provide any analysis for the metrics. It really does not do that. And that concludes my presentation of where we are with this work.
Thank you, Dr. Petrie Martin. Board members, any questions or comments? All right, hearing none. I just had one quick question, this appointed personal privilege. And going up to the red section, specifically discussing the goal 1. I believe there was something about the question, so slide 14. The question as to whether, for objective 16, the increase in the number of educators of color in schools across North Carolina, as to whether there was data available for that. There is data available at the teacher level, right, demographically. I just wanted to confirm that that's so.
That's my understanding, but that's going to be part of the work group discussion of where is that data, how could it be pulled into that dashboard.
Gotcha. Okay. That was the only question I had with this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I need help understanding the difference between the slide 21 and 22. So it says that one of the purposes is to review whether PSUs are making progress towards achieving the board's educational goals and priorities. And the next slide says it does not track organizational performance. So help me understand the difference between those two things.
And just to clarify, slide 21 was our attempt to kind of put some words to what this could be as far as the purpose for this. We're going to bring back to you all more specifics that you all will actually look at and the board will have a chance to vote on. But it was something that was discussed as, is this something where we can at least see how districts are doing with these priorities?
Okay.
Yeah.
So that then assumes that PSUs buy in and support what the board's strategic plan is. And that they are aware of it.
Well, it's twofold. So yes, we have a dissemination plan for, and a feedback process with the PSUs.
Wonderful.
But again, as we bring these final statements of purpose and audience to you, you could choose to include that as a purpose and an audience, or not to include it as a purpose and an audience.
Thank you very much.
We were just trying to put some words to get some clarity.
Can you go back to the first slide? Under the goals. I'm sorry.
Under goals. Okay.
Okay. I'm pretty sure I understand what this means, but it says decrease the number of exclusionary discipline practices by subgroup, suspensions and expulsions. Can you all just kind of put that in layman's terms so I can understand that?
So I will do my best. Again, this plan was first started in 2019, but this particular goal is asking to look at the data regarding suspensions and expulsions. And I think specifically when we talk about exclusionary practices, there is a list, I believe, that is out there, But if you look at the final bullet there where it says define disruptive behaviors, one of the things the group was discussing is that if you really don't know what the definitions are, it's really hard to get a handle on that particular item. So it says decrease the number of exclusionary discipline practices by subgroup. I know that, some of those things include suspensions, expulsions. There's a list of some additional ones as well.
Can I take an attempt at
Sure.
offering some plain language as well? And I hope this is what you're asking. So specifically with subgroups, there are some student groups that are disproportionately suspended or receiving exclusionary discipline. Black students, Native American students, low-income students, males, students identified as EC with learning disabilities. And the objective here is to create parity. There shouldn't be disproportionality, and usually it's around those disruptive behaviors which are very loose and not very well defined, non-violent offenses, things like disrespect, insubordination, so not the stuff you call the cops for, right? So it's about trying to create parity between those subgroups and decreasing exclusionary discipline. And also, there's no research that suggests a lot of those things work because you just kick kids out of school. So I hope that's like,
I'm pretty sure that's what it meant.
Yeah.
That's all.
Appreciate
The only thing I would add is there's a recognition that if students aren't in school, they don't have a chance to learn. We've got to manage behavior while keeping kids in school.
But one of the things that concerns me greatly in schools is that if a child is in school and they're not behaving, no learning's going on for the other students. And that's a huge problem for me. And I definitely understand what's going on here with that language. I understand it completely. I only wanted to ask so I could make sure. But I think I know where a lot of those things come from because I've come from them and I've seen them. So that's all I'm gonna say. I'm just leave it at that.
Yeah, and I would say that I agree with everything that's being said, and for me, the tension that needs to be solved is that we know from teacher surveys that teachers are very frustrated when there are these blanket statements that they are not to suspend students. They don't feel supported by administration, and it's something that causes teachers to switch schools. Maybe not leave the profession, but go someplace else in the district or go a county over. So I think that there's a balancing act that has to occur. I talked to a superintendent in this room this morning about this, this starts from central office, from a superintendent saying, get your numbers down. Then the principal tells the teachers, you're not gonna suspend, and then those kids go to alternative schools, and then they come back to, I think we haven't equipped our teachers and our principals with other ways to solve, or to help students who are acting out. At the same time, we do have a problem with and I have asked the Center for Safer Schools to go in and better define disruptive behaviors on that survey, because we need to be able to compare apples to apples, and we've not been able to do that before. So I think there's several different issues that this objective can, that we can work on, that we can do better on.
Yes, thank you. What makes it so ambiguous and a slippery slope to me is that you can take the very thing that may mean step to the side and speak to them, and that should be enough. Where at the same time, like you were saying, if they're creating disruption that prevents the other students, when you take the ability away from a child to learn, that's a serious matter. And when I'm talking about the person misbehaving or those that are being disrupted, the teacher is charged with providing and maintaining a safe and orderly environment in the classroom, I think is the way it's put. Sometimes these things can be dealt with without interrupting that, and sometimes you have to remove the problem from that space at that time. Maybe we need to talk about how long or where they go when they leave that space. So it is hard to quantify, because the very same act this morning may require a different action than this very same action this afternoon. And it is difficult. And if I'm going to praise the person that finds the answer to it. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Dr. Ford, this is gonna sound very simplistic, but so be it. I am of the philosophy that the best cure for disruptive classrooms is just solid, good teaching. A teacher who knows his or her content can design outstanding interactive lessons that don't drag on for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, that are time on task, walking around the room, patting students on the shoulder. Sometimes they don't want you touching them, I know that. Smiling when they don't expect to smile. Telling a joke when they don't think you have a sense of humor. All of, I know what I'm saying is relationships. It's that special kind of teacher, and I believe they're born. They can be made, but I do believe they're innately, it's in them to teach. And therein, to me, is very simplistic. You're probably saying, Olivia, you sound just like Miss Pollyanna. But that, to me, is the secret. Now, how do we get there? We can.
Well, I hope not to be too vain about including myself in that number, but I would say that as a classroom teacher, I only had to write up a kid less than 5 times.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Because of all the things that you're talking about and all the things we saw in presentations earlier. Education does not exist in a vacuum. It's all those other social, relational complexities. And we have to believe that that can be developed within teachers. Certainly some are born, right? But certainly these are things we hopefully can develop.
That's why we have EPPs.
I agree with everything that was just said, and going with that, culturally responsive teaching practices go hand in hand with that. It's not just my personality goes well with students, is my personality understands that your culture has a certain, like your personality traits that you might have that some people might find offensive, but you're being yourself. And as a teacher, we have to be relatable to them and recognize that all of our students are different and special, and they can all learn, and not one of them is a problem. They are all people who want to learn or who need to learn. And so I think that the wonderful teacher who is equipped with the right practices and the right mindset, we can do anything.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for the comments and questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ford. We'll now turn to the Government and Community Affairs team led by Mr. Wendell Hall. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Wendell Hall, Chair of the Governmental and Community Affairs Committee, along with Ms. Jill Cannis. Today, we will present to the board with help from Mr. Falkenberry, the committee's request, consideration, discussion items on our long-term proposal to the General Assembly on requests coming from a combination of the state board along with a DPI under the direction of Madam Superintendent. At this time, I'm going to ask that Mr. Falkenberry, would he proceed in presenting in the appropriate manner those items that we have discussed. And by the way, many of the items that we find in both of the requests are very similar, that the board, state board committee, and DPI will agree upon. We truly do. Now, there are some items that we have to have more discussion concerning it, but that's what a democratic process is all about. Is discussing our differences and compromising and trying to come up with what's best for students. And all of us know that that's what it's all about. We are not in any disagreement at all with that. And the comprehensive plan is our sort of format that we're looking at. And some of those things, a lot of those things that you will hear today coming from Mr. Falkenberry, it's in there. Whether directly or indirectly, but it's in there. And those are things that we might want to talk about it. Now, I see some people talking about time. Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna take my time. But everybody else does. But this is a committee
pointed his
versus a
finger.
board.
He sure did.
It is certainly important that we have an open discussion about these priorities that we're gonna talk about. Okay? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Committee Chair, and it's been a pleasure working with you and the Co-Chair Jill Kamnitz on this throughout the past several months, as well as senior leadership with the State Board, Chair Davis and Vice Chair Duncan. First, I earlier today when I was listening into the board, our Teacher of the Year, Leah, brought up about the social workers and school nurses, and as the chairman had alluded to, I just want to make sure to highlight this again, that we are championing this next session to have a grant process for Tier 1, Tier 2 schools for school nurses and social workers. The reason why we're doing a grant process is we want to ensure that we are actually getting these type of qualified individuals into the classrooms instead of just doing an allotment where then you don't know what happens with the local decisions after that. Yeah,
I'm so sorry to
Sure.
interrupt. Can we substitute the word grant with application? Because it is an application process, not a grant.
That's a very good point. Yeah,
Yes,
so we're
I was thinking about that at 3:00 this morning. So
Yeah, sorry, and we will update that with the OSBM when we'll have to do a special provision for this. Hopefully, the governor's office will work with us on that one,
Don't
and we
put
work
you
with
on
the
choose,
yeah.
sir. Make sure you note that now.
I got it.
Yes. Application. Yeah.
See, an application.
So that's a very good point. It is not a grant. It is you apply for it. And the reason for that is we have about 1,000. If we wanted one of these in every single school, we would have about 1,000 vacancies. And so with the salary and benefits and all that, that's where you get that number. Everything else we've already gone through multiple times. If you have any specific questions, I'm here to answer them. But if we'd like to go down to the second to last slide, the final additions page. After discussions with the state board and the superintendent, I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up. So the social worker pay increases, we'll be advocating for master's level pay. This is about the average of what the master's level scale is for our social workers. And just talking with our experts in the back, vast majority of them, if not almost all of them, do have a master's degree. So this is about the amount that it would cost not only for the current ones, but hopefully we will have more with a application process with more social workers that would qualify for this master level pay. And this is another provision that we asked for the last budget cycle, and it was one of the few things that the General Assembly did not appropriate was the school psychologist internship program. This is to really help with the pipeline of making sure that districts can help get that pathway to get a school psychologist who need an internship. Almost every program for a school psychologist, you need to go through an internship. So they're going all throughout the Northeast and the Midwest, and we need to really have an attractive program here. And so that's about roughly $5 million. And then I want to talk about the principal turnaround coaches. This is it is building off of what the General Assembly has already instructed us in the Senate Bill 105, which was the first budget, and with the tweaks that we and the flexibility that we were able to get in House Bill 159 with the money they appropriated with ESSER 3 money. But this is to target the 47 chronically low performing schools, so that it's about these principal turnaround coaches would focus those efforts, about 3 per school, and these are the salary and benefits that it would cost to hire those full time to address those. Any questions?
I do have a quick question.
Yes.
With regard to the principal turnaround coaches, that isn't new. We already have those positions in place, right?
Yes, we do, and these are an additional to address the 47 chronically low performing schools that are not being served now.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
So how do they fit under the regional support model? Who do they report to?
So he's leaving us. So Dr. Taylor, this would be, however the reorganization that we do once Dr. Taylor leaves, we can have that conversation with you. But regional support, I can't answer that because we'll have a vacancy in the next week.
So I would say
Okay.
that the that the turnaround coaches will be a part of an already existing support structure that we currently call the CARES Act, that are federally funded positions that we eventually need to ask the state to fund. And, excuse me, that they will become a part of a new school turnaround model that will be, I would say, a more comprehensive approach to leveraging resources we already have, and then adding in resources we don't currently have. So I plan to come back to the board with an explanation for what that model is going to look like in February.
The reason for asking was looking at concentration of chronically low performing schools in several of our districts, and that it might not be, it's not a universal spread, or it won't be a universal spread, that perhaps there would be a concentration in some areas of the state and not in others. I heard new model, which is needed.
Yep.
So, okay.
So, another quick question around so with this, assuming this gets funded, how many are we talking, how many principal coaches would we have, a number?
So right now we're serving, we have 84 or 87 chronically low performing schools, and I believe we have
14.
14. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna get
Folks
37.
just working on,
Right, so they're divided
Principals.
across schools.
right. So remember that in turnaround work, before you can start to address classroom culture, building culture has to be addressed. So leadership matters, and we want our principals to, as is stated in the state board's strategic plan, we want our principals to be highly effective and able to lead even the most challenging of schools.
Yeah, good idea.
Ms. Candace, I see your hand.
I was just gonna quickly mention that the social worker, the master's pay there is quite a difference between a bachelor's level social worker and a master's level social worker in terms of the direct service that they can provide to children and families. So it's not just because they have a master's, it's also that
That's
they
right.
have a broader array of skills.
It relates,
Yes.
which truly relates back to what we heard this morning. In the different reports about social workers and school psychologists who have different training, to where a psychologist really talks about what's going on, but that social worker, someone else implements the plan or intervention plan. But anyway, all of that sort of plays in together as we're looking at these asks. Now remember, fellow board members, I just want to emphasize a point. This is something that we're proposing. We don't know yet whether we're gonna get it or not. But at least we're planning together to get these things in place for these children. Any other discussion at this point?
Just to tie back, and this will take 15 seconds, to tie back to Ms. Camden's point about the difference in terms of skill sets between a bachelor social worker and a social worker with a master's, unless there's a different category that I'm not aware of, and that's very possible. An MSW is not necessarily a school social worker, unless that person is going to be doing something at an administrative level. There may be another type of master's. Anyway, just a point. That's all I'm making.
Thank you. Mr. Lieutenant Governor? All right, thank you. Anyone else? Anything else to say?
Mr. Faulkner, I do think it'd be helpful, I mean, you skipped right over down to this one, which was But could you go back through because I think it's important for us to have a view of the entire ask.
Sure.
Could you
Do
go
you-
back to the top and,
I'd be more than happy to.
yeah, just a brief touch on all the items in there.
And as the chairman, we've had conversations throughout the month too. And what I will say is when we're going through our budget here at DPI, we start off with the director level, and they give us the needs, and then we work with the deputies, and then the deputies come together and kind of see what the priorities are. And the chairman had asked is let's rank these to see what the importance is, and also OSBM asked us to do that as well. But when we had our conversation with OSBM, we said, we're asking for what we need. We're not just throwing out a bunch of wish list items. This is what we feel at the department that will best suit public education in the state. So if not all of these are ones in my opinion, but mostly what you see here is the cost of sort of doing business here with technology as it is with PowerSchool and then the eScholar stuff, with the UERS. The subscription technology, software platform funds. These are what the IT people here are telling us what it's going to cost. I can go into more detail if anybody has specific questions on each one of these. And then if you go to the permanent office, I'll just scroll right up that one. The permanent office with virtual instruction support. Just a reminder on that one is with the new law that was created that would allow for local virtual academies to exist. We need staff here to vet those applications to ensure that they're in compliance with the law and that they're providing an adequate education for our students. So we do need staff to stay in compliance with the law. If you want to go down, next one. School connectivity and cybersecurity. Don't think you all know about the attacks that we see all the time, and we need to ensure that we provide the adequate support for our PSUs across the state, working with our CIO, Vanessa Wren, and Michael Ramsey with these requests. We also need to have competitive salaries to compete with the private sector, and not only the private sector, but agencies within state government. So this is why salaries are pretty competitive here, so we can recruit and maintain those quality employees here. But all of these are services that we have either provided or are needing to provide once, like ESSER II funding and some of the ESSER III funding that we've received. And then where was the one? I'm trying to look at the 800,000. So network asset discovery. We currently use a vendor for that one. I know we had talked with the board leadership about this one. About 80 or so of our PSUs currently use this across the state. We think we can get that if we were to get this 800,000 to provide network asset discovery for almost 200 PSUs. But it's just an ongoing support to our districts for stuff like for cybersecurity issues. District operations and child nutrition. I'll actually start from the bottom on this one. Child nutrition, eliminate the copay for reduced price meals. Really working with the superintendent and Dr. Harvey on this one, as well as the board. I know this is a passion of all of yours. But we keep going to the General Assembly asking for non-recurring funds. And at a certain point, we just feel at the department that if you are getting reduced price meals, your situation with your family changes every so often, especially with inflation and the economy and everything. So if you are getting a reduced price meal, we just kind of drawn the line in the sand and say, you need to have your meals covered. So that's what we're doing, is filling in the gap here. Now we're doing $5 million as the starting point, and that could fluctuate. Hopefully it goes down, and we won't need, but last year was 3.9 million. We think it's going to be about 5.2 million. We're asking the General Assembly, let's just do this once and for all, $5 million, and then we will give you the most accurate information so we can decrease money or increase it each budget cycle. District operations, transportation, just providing ongoing support to, that's the exceptional children analysts, just providing additional support to the districts that we are currently not providing as robust as we should be. The TIMS contract, for those of you, this is a contract that we've had with the university system or UNC for years, and it's really a bargain for what they offer, and this is just the cost of inflation and other needs for salaries to increase that for those. and consolidated facility information database. I can report now that we finally had that RFP out. Thank you, Dr. Harvey, and everybody on her team for putting DIT and getting them to get this through after almost a year and a half. But that RFP should be wrapped up by the end of the month. And then this one will allow us to track kind of the bonding and the payments of what's going on at the local level, so we know at the state level what's happening in the construction world. And I think it's a good investment for us at DPI and for our districts and for our General Assembly members to know. If you scroll down, educator preparation, licensure, Power School applicant tracking for PSUs. We are using some IT money to create the platform that it is, but then these are the ongoing costs that it will take to maintain and run the system. Consultant for alternative learning, education prep, licensure. These are FTEs that we really need at the department. We're kind of right now separating these duties and multiple other people with multiple other duties as well. So we really want to hone in on these specific areas of public education to ensure that we're giving the support to the districts. And then replacement of the online licensure system. This is what it will take to maintain it going forward. And early learning, pre-K, literacy assessment. This is to ensure, right now we have funding for all of our NC pre-K students. We have funding right now for their kind of entrance exam into the K-12 system. This is to ensure that all pre-K students have this same opportunity to have the same test going forward. Literacy and invention plan funding. This is to keep the science of reading, maintain it so it can go on for years to come. Also allow for teachers who are coming into the state who might have not had science of reading training, or if their EPP hasn't offered it yet, to offer that, but also buy the materials and the licenses that go with the science of reading training. The PSU specialist salary increases. We really want to be competitive. We are very thankful that the General Assembly appropriated 128 FTEs to us for science of reading for coaches for each district as well as regionally, but we need to make sure the salaries are competitive with what teachers would be making at the with the supplements. So this would offset that. As for Governor School Computer Science Development and Instructional, as the superintendent has talked about, this is no longer the year of the workforce, but last year with it being the year of the workforce, and we've talked about this numerous times, but computer science is by the year 2040, the industries are telling us that 70% of jobs are going to require some type of computer science. So this is to really help the Governor's School with our smartest and brightest students that are attending this to have that introduction if they've never had it before, but also dive really deep into computer science, but also address curriculum as a whole there, and also increase the enrollment that we can allow in these schools too. Increase the AIG allotment. We have not seen an increase in 25 years of this. So this is to get, right now we're funding AIG at 4%, and this is to get us double it to 8%. We have, depending on the district, county, we have between 8 to 12% of students are deemed AIG. So this is to help with those resources. And as we all know, economics, personal finance, professional development is now the law in the state, and this is to do ongoing professional development and help with turnover in the state, as we see about 8% turnover in our schools every year. All right. I know I'm speaking fast, so stop me if you have any questions. As for charter schools, we very thankful that the General Assembly provided us 2 additional FTEs for the Office of Charter Schools. But what we've done with the reorganization, now that Ashley Picaro is there, it is very apparent that we also need an assistant director FTE to assist with our more than 200 charter schools that exist now. And then also we are going to be advocating for, with a lot of charter schools, a lot more jumping on to the science of reading. We are going to, we need a little bit more support for Amy Ryan's team. And so we have a charter school coordinator for Read to Achieve. And then also, we don't offer services right now with 2 charter schools to help them inspect their buses because it's not required. But we are going to have conversations with the General Assembly about how do we offer those services and to the charter schools. These are very technical in nature. Working with Alexis's shop and Rob Dietrich's shop, especially with the IT people on the digital teaching and learning, data audit team analysts. We need some trained professionals that can really understand the data that's coming in through PowerSchool, so that way we're being good stewards of the money that we are receiving from the General Assembly and putting out to the districts. And then we need more high quality staff in the financial services division. As many of you know, it's hard to keep that type of level of employees when you got the private sector and all these the private industry moving here into Raleigh. So these are the positions that would help enhance that. If you want to go down. And then Office of Learning Recovery and Acceleration. This request is actually asking to get funded in the second year of the biennium because we have funding that goes through September of 2024. But this is just to maintain the Office of OLR as we know it. I think we all can agree that it's been a very good use of funds, and the research that's coming out of there is phenomenal, and practice and states all around the country are coming to us wanting to know how we're doing things in North Carolina. Also, the Promising Practices grants. This is a non-recurring fund that we'll be having a conversations with the General Assembly with ESSER money that will be running out September of 2024. These funds will allow districts to continue be able to apply to continue initiatives with companies, vendors, whoever it might be, that have been doing extraordinary work on moving the needle with public education. And so they could say, hey, we want to keep this going for an extra year, and then it gives OLR the opportunity to assess and evaluate the groups that are out there that are offering services to students, and it also kind of bridges that to the next biennium budget so that the General Assembly can address what was working with ESSER funding and what wasn't, and go from there. As for the Professional Development Fund for High Impact Tutoring, this is a huge initiative for the superintendent. Especially as we look at treating teachers as the professionals that they are, and most of the professional development that you all go through is mostly compliance work. Here's a new mandate, go learn how to do it. And so this would really help with time management, understanding summative and formative assessments, and also just giving refreshers and utilizing NCAT and other places around the state to allow teachers to come, collaborate, share ideas. And we don't really have that vehicle right now at DPI or really anywhere in the state, other than if it's compliance work, which we want to give more avenues for professional development for our teachers. All right. And these real quickly, pathways, we will discuss that in the future. Talking with OSBM, they're kind of leaving a placeholder there for us as we look at budget projections and revenues, and also with the plan with the state board and DPI are working on. We just already discussed the application program and the new EC funding formula. We're working with Dr. Sherry Thomas on that. Hopefully we'll get that information probably in March, maybe late February. And then working with the General Assembly on career development plans, and so we are looking to utilize. We need the Department of Commerce, to have their website up and running for us to plug into that with career development plans that we'll be bringing to you once we know what the funding looks like. So we're advocating that the Department of Commerce gets their $500,000 to keep careers.org going. And then, as many of you have heard, I think there's even been articles written on it recently about bus drivers, people wanting to become school bus drivers not being able to. There's just not enough trained professionals at DMV or enough time slots. So this is to increase that regionally so that way we can address it. So districts aren't waiting sometimes months to hire a new bus driver that is ready and willing to work. And then these are just special if you want me to talk about these, this is kind of getting in the weeds on some of the stuff, but the state board and DPI right now in statute are tasked with if districts want it to get accredited, and that's fine if the General Assembly would like to do that. We think there are better uses of resources and there are other avenues to get this done. But if the General Assembly would like us to maintain this, and we are going to ask for additional 5 FTEs. Governor Moorhead School maintenance of operation. When Moorhead School moved over from DHHS, there was a MOU that was signed that said Dorothea Dix campus will continue to offer support, maintenance, fixing light bulbs, and other things. Well, Dorothea Dix is winding down, and we need the support there on the campus just to have those employees come over. So the General Assembly will either request that they just transfer them over, or we will need an additional 12 to 16 FTEs. Anonymous tip line, we think this is a great resource for the state, but we need the funding for it, so $850 recurring if the General Assembly would like to keep it. Update the principal salary schedule. We've talked about this many a times, Dr. Green. And then modify psychologist allotment law. That one specifically is right now, and we've been working with the committee chair on this, Wendell Hall, is that there are some districts, and we'll know soon, we should get that data by the end of the month, of how many districts have not been able to hire a school psychologist. And last year was about 22, if I remember, that we're not able to. But if you're not able to, after a year or so, that you'll be able to petition DPI to use those funds as for contractual services so that our students' needs are getting met. The Holocaust Education PD, we're doing incredible work here with Christy Day and her team. The issue is the money, for the bulk of the money that will need to be used for this year is for professional development for our teachers for compliance work, but we won't be doing that professional development until the summer. So we either need them to do non-reversion or just reappropriate $250,000 because we will revert money by the end of the year. And then additional classifications for differentially skilled licensed professionals. So, and then the final thing, needs-based capital grants, these have been a tremendous success and around the state, and we're seeing districts that would never have had the ability to build schools be able to build new modern schools for their children. And so it's been $800 million over the past 2 years. We are working with the General Assembly constantly to not only increase the amount of money that goes into this, but kind of make sure that it's available and that the criteria it goes to the districts that need it. And working with Karen Fairley with the school safety grants, she has said that with the $41 million that they appropriated last year, that is probably what we need going forward. So we're going to ask for those to not be non-recurring anymore, and just to ensure that the SRO grant remains recurring. And I do want to report real quick on the CT ancillary grants. This was an incredible program that the General Assembly put out. They only did $1 million this year because I think they wanted to see the interest. But this was allowing Tier 1 and Tier 2, well, all tiers, but it really went to Tier 1 and Tier districts, but to buy cows or trucks or greenhouses so they get the materials that they need for CTE. And we had over $11 million in requests. And so I think you're going to see more of an increase in this one too that will be happening. And then NCAT, we want to see that funding not go from non-recurring to recurring. I think I covered it. Yep, and then I already did that.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie, for that presentation. It's on the table for discussion, along with looking at fully supporting and funding the comprehensive plan, which a lot of this stuff is found in it, along with helping our transformational, regional and district transformational teams with the principals, but along with coaches for those teachers out there, those low-performing, chronically low-performing schools, that we have also is in the part of the proposal. What is your pleasure? And anybody with any other questions? Any other concerns? Mr. Duncan?
Dr. Oxenden.
Oh,
No, go ahead, I think you were first to the draw on that.
I don't know that I was.
That's
I'm
okay.
glad to
Hey,
defer.
you
So
do fast.
I'll go for it. So going back to the shortage, lack of the LEAs, the inability of LEAs to find school psychologists, I think that is a concern broadly. Is it that there, are LEAs after the school psychologists being part of the personnel allotment? Or are they saying it's just impossible to find school psychologists, period, even to contract? What is the shortage, the nature of the shortage?
So as of last year, we get this data they report, I think, in December, January, and so I'll have it by the end of the month and we'll be able to share it. But as of last year, there were between 20 to 25 LEAs that were not able to use the FTE specifically for school psychologists that the General Assembly gave them back in 2021. We'll see about that. I think the issue, and especially talking with the committee chair, is that that money's just sitting there. So why just have it sit there if you can use contractual services? What we do get from districts, which is amazing, is we see the breakdown of how they're spending their money on FTE, whether it's federal, state, and local. So we'll be able to see if maybe they are utilizing, they don't have a physical FTE, but we can see if they're using contractual services or not, and we'll report that back. But if the state is having money there, I think we're going to at least have that conversation with the GA of let that money go to good use.
Yeah, because I mean, if there's a shortage, there's a shortage, whether they are part of the FTE or contractual services.
I think it's a regional thing more than I think there's. I'll talk to the experts too, but I think there was a cluster of counties that were unable to fill those spots. So that's why the internship program too is pretty key on this, because if you can have somebody where they get their internship credit and they're getting paid, and then hey, they started roots there, you know what? I might stay for a couple more years at least to do this because I had that opportunity here.
Vice Chair Duncan?
Two quick things. And when we see FTEs, that is an employment position, could you confirm, just so we have an understanding for people who are not used to look at this, if it says, for example, $120,000 for the position as a reasoned estimate, that doesn't mean that's what the salary is. The salary would be more like 90, then a third benefit, so the total would be 120, but that would include not just salary, that would include all the benefits, including significant amount for retirement, which is in order to protect the integrity of our retirement system, which I know our treasurer cares about.
That is exactly correct, Vice Chair Duncan. And whenever we ask for an FTE or we budget here at DPI, I know working with our chief of staff, it's a little less than 35%, but let's just call it 35% of what that package is just for benefits. Yes.
The other thing is really more a broader question. As superintendent, as you know, I'm representative of all our board members, I think, pretty passionate about the need for dealing with our most heavily impacted schools. And I was very glad to hear about your thoughts, and we'll look forward to hearing your thoughts in terms of the vision in February. I noticed several items, 3 or 4 items that we had in the budget were, in essence, to be left open to some degree because we don't know, for example, with the work that's being done in the licensing area, what a pilot program cost would be. Some of the EC estimates are still in process, and we won't have those till February or March, that we can present this budget in a way that we leave open to some degree, because once you present a vision or a plan, there's going to be a need, and once you have, I know you're looking for somebody to come in the position, then we're going to want to have the ability for that person to be able to act effectively in the districts around the state. And some of that is covered by some of the programs that are in here, but not all. And so I would hope that we have 17 principal positions, principal consultant positions. I hope we will leave open the possibility and likelihood that we will need some additional positions once it's better defined after your presentation next month.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. In looking at our current org chart, I've identified that we have about 200 people employed by the department right now who work in districts. And if this board recalls the Ernst & Young report's recommendation number 6, that recommendation is what led to the creation of the 8 regional directors, which has been a very positive step forward in allowing local superintendents, but especially their central office staff, to liaise with the department and to know kind of what's happening with the legislature, what's happening with new law, what's happening with federal requirements, et cetera. But what's been missing from operationalizing that recommendation is very significant, and that is that there is supposed to be a dual reporting structure between those 200 people who work in a combination of either operation services with the district or academic services in the district. And if we could successfully operationalize that recommendation, we would have a regional structure that is coordinated, that has a common culture of collective impact, that recognizes that there needs to be common use of data throughout, not just the region, but the district. Those teams would be able to get down into the school level, which I don't really think that they can right now. That structure is not in place to allow a regional director to lead a team that consists of someone from Exceptional Children, someone from Digital Teaching and Learning, someone from the Office of Early Learning, someone from Educator Support Services, to come into a school and look at how they can effect comprehensive needs assessment results, for example. And so I think that we've got that single point of contact in place with the regional directors, which is great. But there's so much more that we need to do. And part of this structure needs to include district and regional support, who are those are the teams that currently are supporting low-performing schools in school turnaround. And also we need to coordinate between federal programs, which is another $70 million in supports that comes from the feds for comprehensive support and targeted support interventions. And I just feel like sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And so this new assistant superintendent role that has been advertised, and we are interviewing for at the end of this week, that person their job will be to coordinate all of these efforts so that we can support all of our schools better, but specifically our chronically low-performing schools. And I would also add that it's not a coincidence that all of this is happening as we are all in agreement that we need to rethink how we are designating low-performing schools. If we've seen modeling done where we can see if we were to change that formula from 80-20 to 50-50, we would have a lot fewer low-performing schools. What about our schools that may have gotten a principal 3 years ago who have been growing and are on their way to coming off the low, or would be off the low-performing list if we changed that formula, which is so heavily weighted on those one-and-done test scores. So I think there's more information to be gleaned from what's happening in recovery. There's certainly more, I look forward to sharing a more comprehensive picture of what this vision for school turnaround looks like next month, and to introducing to you all who is going to be the new assistant superintendent of district and regional support.
I look forward to that also, and excited about that. And I feel like I can be fully supportive of this budget so long as we are in position to reserve once we see your vision, some additional funding to fill out the district and regional support efforts, however they best take shape to benefit our students. The schools we really care about and have for a long time.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Chairman.
Just one comment to touch on point you made earlier, Mr. Hall. So this view that Mr. Falconberry gave us is sort of a micro view. It's of programs and specific FTEs and initiatives that we're wanting to pursue or expand or what have you. The other way to look at this is a macro view. And for us, the macro view is somewhat based on our strategic plan, but really grounded in our comprehensive plan, the 7 elements of our comprehensive plan, one of which happens to be an assistance and turnaround function that provides necessary support to low-performing schools. My own assessment of this is that we're already doing a lot in this comprehensive plan. In fact, you could look at the pathways work, the work on assessment and accountability, moving towards a competency model, changing school performance grades, increased career counseling and engagement with students so that they see the purpose of their education, all the work around literacy and improving the quality of instruction, and the current turnaround work that's ongoing are all elements of this comprehensive plan. What I don't want to get lost is exactly what Mr. Hall said, is our objective is to fully implement the plan. And we'll do that by continuing to expand these programs that are underway and by adding new ones. And so we're calling on the legislature and the governor to continue to support our full implementation of the comprehensive plan. So that's kind of the macro view connect with what Mr. Falconberry just shared.
Thank you, Mr.
Back to you, sir.
Appreciate that. Tomorrow, we have it on the agenda for an action item. Give it some thought, and we'll be back to move. I did want to thank Mr. Falconberry for his presentation, along with the support of our superintendent in these areas. It's been a strong process, and I was honored to be a part of it. And we'll just see. Yes, I see it's strong.
No, I'm saying good for you. You did a great job.
But along with that, the bottom line is, what can we do for children to make it better for their future? And I will end with that.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. This particular item has so many different parts to it. I think what would help us is we'll look to the Government Community Affairs Committee to produce a draft motion that we'll post by the end of the day so that it'll pull all these different pieces together and give us something to work with tomorrow when it comes up for action.
That would be very helpful.
Okay. That concludes our Government Community Affairs work. Now, saving the best for last is business operations, led by Vice Chair Duncan. Chair Duncan, you're the man.
How fast can you do this?
You've never been so loved, Alan.
Along with the renowned Wendell Hall, we lead the Business Operations Committee. We really try to do the impossible and bring these meetings into a close, but it's going to be hard to do it on time when we're starting 50 minutes after we were supposed to be finished. So
That's always your caveat.
with that caveat, we have several items, and I'm going to ask our speakers to address very directly the items that we need to know about. We'll start on Biz Op 1. We have approval of contracts over $500,000. Capital Chevrolet is the first one. Kevin Harrison is going to present that. Kevin, you can have 30 seconds on the contract and 30 seconds on what gas prices are.
Certainly. All right. Real quickly then. This is a contract to get some trucks from Capital Chevrolet because Ford said they couldn't produce what we approved of, the state board approved of in September. So, given that we couldn't get the Fords that we originally asked for pretty late in the game, we found some extras over at a Chevrolet dealership and said we'll take them. That's kind of where we're at, about the same price. That's all right. That will leave us short of trucks of what we wanted to order, but we got what we got. There's a supply chain issue with computer chips, and so we have to take what we can get. We'll have to order more next year because of that. So then, we're good there. I can move on to.
That, you got 20 left.
All right. So then, moving on to fuel prices. So fuel prices are all over the board. To give you an idea, it was $4.25 at the end of, it was $4.25 a gallon at the end of November. It was $2.90 in mid-December. It's now up to $3.45 again. So we're all over the board. I will tell you that from a big picture perspective, we've purchased about 10 million gallons of fuel so far this year. That's down a little bit over usual levels. But we have also spent about $15 million more than expected on that 10 million gallons of fuel. So what we would say is that given that there's a fuel reserve, as well as some funding available in the base allotment itself for a fuel price increase, we are cautiously optimistic that the situation will
Right on the margin.
be right on the mark
Yeah, let's
there.
hope we stay there. Thank you.
Certainly.
Thanks for the work you're doing monitoring that.
No problem.
Our next item is a contract with Presidio Network Solutions, which is the renewal of the Run Zero licenses. And I believe Mike Ramsey is here to give us a less than a minute presentation on this important item.
This important item
It is.
it provides PSUs with the ability to quickly scan their network and understand exactly what's on the network. We have rolled this out to about 80 PSUs already and have been amazed at the devices that the schools thought that they had on the network, and then all the things that they weren't aware of. And the fundamental piece of cybersecurity is you got to know what you got. And so this has been phenomenal. We want to continue rolling it out. And are there any specific questions? I can get into the Uber Geek details if you'd like.
And today is not the day for Uber.
But I am available anytime you want to. Some really interesting things have been found on networks that we were all like, what?
The bottom line is this is important to renew because it is helping with cybersecurity in a very
Absolutely,
significant way.
and absolutely.
Thank you. Teach NC is next, Dr. Jason Caldwell, and he will be quick because we know about Teach NC. This is just in a new posture, which he can
Yes.
sum up in 30 to 45 seconds.
I can do it in 30. Give me 30 and I'll be done. Just so very quickly, again, good afternoon, everyone. This is in regards to the Teach NC contract that is coming before you again. To get approval, we had to go through some DIT and internal council review issues that we were able to get feedback on and work through. And now we're asking for the contract to be reapproved and resubmitted. And just very quickly recapping for those to make sure everyone is aware, Teach NC is the platform that we're using for teacher recruitment. That is a web-based platform that helps us to do some marketing as well as one-on-one coaching for those that are interested in going to the teaching profession. And so our contract is with Teach.org, which is the national parent company, and we have been given a state-based affiliation called Teach NC. And so this is for the contract to be approved for that. So thank you all. So that was 25 seconds, I hope.
Sounds like it. So this is very good. Thank you for the
Thank you.
presentation. We of course are familiar with Teach NC. We're now taking over more direct ownership of it. That's the shorthand of this. And Dr. Caldwell is leading that effort, and we appreciate it. Metametrics, I think you got an extra 30 seconds thanks to Dr. Caldwell. Curtis Sonneman, who we are very glad to have here. Dr. Howard is not with us today, but Curtis
No,
is.
she's not. Thank you.
Tell us about this.
Thank you, Committee Chair. I will try not to use that 30 seconds. So this is for the Lexiles and Quantiles used in the field based on the tests. This contract was approved in September, approved by the State Board in June. It was not fully executed through the procurement process because there was a determination whether or not it was an IT product or not. It is not an IT product. So the current contract expired in October, so this is coming back to you. The recommended approval will enable a 5-year contract for a 3-year contract with 2 years of renewal.
And that's consistent with how we do many of our technology contracts in terms of that 3-year, then 1-year renewal or another year renewal. Any questions on this?
I have a quick question.
Yes,
Vice Chair.
Dr. Arsenault.
Help me remember how is a classroom teacher using Lexiles today? It's been a long time since that's come up, that topic.
So
I know it was very huge years ago with level text.
Yes, so I believe they're still continuing to use that. They're using the Lexiles. We provide the student with a Lexile on the assessment, and those teachers can then look for leveled texts that align to what they're doing.
I see.
And
I see.
may I add to that,
Yes.
please? And then also important to note is that we benchmark our K-3 diagnostic assessments, or our vendor partner does, against a certain Lexile for certain grades.
Yeah. So, would there be any significant relationship between level text, now I'm really taking you in the weeds, I apologize for this. Level text and anything in science of reading?
There's, I think what you're referring to is possibly, decodable text versus leveled text. So we'll have decodable texts in those early grades, and then leveled text with the Lexiles as they move into 3rd and 4th grades. So they're not compatible. They are compatible, is what I should say.
Probably more useful in the upper grades.
I would agree
Lexiles.
with that.
Thank you, that answers my question.
Any other questions? First, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're now at BizOp 2, John Kiefer, who's renowned for making the unknowable knowable. And today he's gonna do it in a really quick manner. This is not, actually under goal 1, objective 1, that's just a typo in our, material. These are 2 unrelated, policies that both of them need some cleanup based on, existing, changes. One of them is the state allotment policy for smart school bus safety. The other is the 21st Century Community Learning Centers program. John.
Yes, thank you. So for the first change for the Smart School Bus Safety Program, the Appropriations Act of 2021 allowed named participants to opt out of the program and allowed DPI to select substitutes for any opt-outs based on similar student populations. During the application process last year, we had 9 public school units opt not to participate in the program. After 25 PSUs expressed interest in being substitutes, the agency selected 9 replacements based on the ADM similarities between the PSUs that were interested in participating and the ones who had opted out. So this change to the allotment policy removes the public school units that opted out of the program and inserts the substitutes and the award amounts for each public school unit.
Very good. Are there any questions? All right, John deserves a special award. That was 180 pages of material. He just summarized it.
That's a skill.
About 2 minutes, so.
Not really.
And there's a lot of, if you look, there is a lot of work that's reflected in here. And we appreciate and put a lot of confidence in the work you do to help on these update on these important policies.
I appreciate that. Our second update is for the 21st Century Community Learning Centers program. This is to correct a identified typo in the PRC 110 policy during the transition from the fiscal year 22 policy to the fiscal year 23 policy. The maximum award amount was inadvertently changed to $300,000, so this updates it to the correct $400,000 amount to make sure that there's no confusion among stakeholders as to the maximum grant award amount for that program.
And that was a one-page correction that we all got quick. So, John, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions at all for John? All right, that moves us into BizOp 3, again, an action on first read item, which is a report to the General Assembly on full-time equivalent student calculation for the 21-22 school year. Jennifer Bennett is here to present. You'll recall we spent time last year in terms of working through what definition of full-time equivalent to use. We spent a lot of time on that. Out in the field, there's a great deal of interest in that. That being said, this presentation is not about that. We agreed, we came to what the definition will be, and this is just simply now reflecting an annual report that Jennifer can cover very quickly.
30 seconds. So just a reminder, this is Part B of the law. So last spring, you did enact a formula based on Part A. This is simply the report that disaggregates that data as required in the legislation. As a reminder, the approved formula is there for your reference. This annual report is to show the number of students in the full-time equivalency by public school unit by grade. and that has to be disaggregated. It also requires a detailed report that disaggregates that data by course, by grade. We have provided in here now, I do want to say that the report was not attached to your materials. We did run into a problem with when we were reviewing the reports and provided to us by our vendor. We saw a significant error in how that calculation was being attributed. So we went back to them to re-engage and rerun that report for us. We expect to have that next week. We'll have to do another review of that data. We want to make sure the detailed report does not identify any individual student potential and make sure that that is scrubbed. We will meet the JLOC deadline of January 15th. So what, on the next two slides, I'm giving you a sample of what that report looks like. So you have the first is just that student FTE compared to enrolled by grade for each PSU. So that part's very simple. The detailed report is on the summary level. That detailed summary report by itself, when we convert to a PDF, is over 9,500 pages. So when you get the report, don't hit print.
Not even I hit print on this.
So, just saying, it would be a while. So that annual report, this is an example of it in the PowerPoint for you just to see it is disaggregated. When it says local in there, that means it's being that course is being provided by the LEA in the classroom at the district. They requested that we have, when it's a community college course, is it virtual by a third-party vendor? All of that information is in this report. And basically that's it. It's an annual report. The first report is due January 15th. It will be annual October going forward.
Any questions? This will be, as Jennifer said, an annual report, but I think it will become fairly routine. It will just be filled with data and very lengthy. So, thank you.
Sure.
Our last action on first read item is Biz Op 4, which is a report to the North Carolina General Assembly on School Connectivity Initiative. And Dr. Wren is here to report on that. And one thing that this report is worth looking at in the sense that it highlights the value that E-rate brings to our department and to our state. And I'm sure you may touch upon that in your brief report.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. This is the 16th year of the School Connectivity Initiative, and I think that's hard to believe that it's been going on that long, but I think it is one of the most successful technology initiatives and a stalwart of what consortium purchasing can do, because we provide this internet for all of our PSUs right here, and we're leveraging E-rate, and we'll touch on that very quickly, to do that. So we're delighted to bring you this annual report. This report is due January 15th. And but I want to go over with you very quickly what school connectivity is. It certainly has morphed over the years. It started out as providing internet to every classroom. And so certainly what we have done since 2016 is to make sure that fiber is ran to every school in our state. We also have Wi-Fi in every single classroom across the state. We've also provided firewall, content filtering, single sign-on identity management, network engineering, and training and consultation services for every school. And I think when you think about a school today, or just think about when your internet goes out at home, it's very different than it was 16 years ago. Our schools' communication systems, their security cameras, their phones, their grades, everything they depend on depends on the quality of this internet piped into that school. So I'm really happy about what we are able to report today. On the next slide, you will see that we do utilize the federal E-rate program. It's administered by the Federal Communication Commission. PSUs receive discounts in their internet services and their networking equipment. Those discounts can come as discounted billing from the provider, or they can pay the full amount and get reimbursed at a later date. So there's two ways that they can go about that. The level of discount is based on their participation in the National School Lunch Program. Our statewide average is 74%. And I think that is very significant. Over the last 16 years, we have had $2 billion worth of networking services, and we have been reimbursed $1.2 billion of that. So I think that's very significant and very successful about the consortium purchasing that we've been able to do as a state with this program. Every dollar in state funding delivers about $3.44 of value. Just another perspective on that. 2022 in review. This was a year of many milestones for our school connectivity initiative, and we had a lot of accomplishments as we look back. This year, we went back out to RFP for the first time in 5 years for our school internet, our firewall, and content filtering, and we now have a new 5-year contract for those services. We also, as a result of the pandemic, and it's administered by the LCC, but it is not E-rate, the LCC provided a program for the first time called the Emergency Connectivity Fund. And what that fund did was provided money for schools to purchase devices and student home internet, and that has not happened before. Our schools applied and received $200 million just through that program. So the school connectivity team administered that program as well. That also is going to lead to one of our recommendations that I will introduce my co-presenter in just a minute, and he will talk about that as well. And also, as part of that, is upgrading our firewall infrastructure. We have been on a Cisco ASA firewall at all of our schools for many years. We are moving them over to a different hardware that has more intense monitoring. We've talked about cybersecurity being a new issue that we are tackling aggressively, and this is one of the ways that we are doing that. So that is also being provided. And I'm going to make sure I didn't miss anything here. We've also been able to develop a modern program for our identity and access management, IAM, NC Ed Cloud. All of you have logged into it and you've seen that. So we do have a new plan for that, and we will be going out to RFP for that early this year. So that will be part of that system. But what's made this so successful has certainly been developing the strategy around how we administer this. This didn't happen accidentally. It was very intentional to make sure that we've provided equal access to all of our schools and students. So we have a very healthy relationship and partnership with the Friday Institute and MCNC and DIT that helps us accomplish all of these things. So I want to introduce you my co-presenter, Ray Zeiss. He's the Senior Director at the Friday Institute. He has developed many tools that helps us monitor in detail the effectiveness of these programs, and he's going to share with you some data now on equal access and some final recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you. I've been at the Friday Institute for 10 years working on this project. It is, in my mind, by far the most cost-effective use of tax dollars I've seen and been able to be a part of, and I really appreciate the teams I work with, especially the E-rate team here at DPI. The network engineering team at MCNC led by Dave Furness, and of course the individual tech directors and their staffs that actually do the real work of installing and getting everything up and running. I had a bunch of comments, but in the interest of time, I'm going to skip to the main things. First thing is the program is working well. Don't change too much. That'll be my first comment. There's three main parts. Here we go. This is the total network capacity over the last decade. As you can see, it has gone up 10x in 10 years. We had a dip from COVID when the kids came back with way more devices than when we had before COVID. There was a huge increase, and we still did not go over capacity. So we're doing a great job at planning and predicting how much capacity to buy. There are some organizations that say we don't buy enough, and they've ranked us 43rd in the nation. I do not agree with that. I think North Carolina and Utah have hands down the best school connectivity programs in the country, and that is without a doubt. So we'll go to the next slide. I don't want to spend too much on One of the things I've done is taken the data and put it into some dashboards. The web link up there, go.ncsu.edu/SCI report, has 12 different ways we've looked at the data. This one was the most surprising, most interesting, and I think is a real win for the state. X-axis is the percent of students in school lunch program. Y-axis is average internet usage. As you can see, there's no correlation, right? So that means that the kids are getting internet access regardless of wealth or rurality. Solid dots are urban and open circles are rural. So we've looked at the data in many other different ways, dollars per ADM, dollars per megabit, everything. The key thing is that the SCI dollars leveraged with E-rate means that for solid, good internet access in every classroom, no local funds are required, and everybody gets the same high-quality internet access. I'll go to the next slide, and this is just kind of an eye chart talking about Wi-Fi in the classroom. We were the first state in the country to declare Wi-Fi in every classroom. I think that was in 2017 or 2018. That equipment needs to be refreshed every few years. That program is in place. It's $167 per student every 5 years. Whatever E-rate doesn't pay, we use with state dollars. So every school, regardless of any other factor, is getting $167 per student every 5 years. Let's do the next slide, please. And then this is how the funds were actually used. As you can see, most of the funding is leveraged against E-rate. There are a few things that are not currently E-rate eligible. Cybersecurity is one of them. So firewalls and identity and those things are not covered by E-rate. We're actually in the process of writing comments to the FCC to ask them, along with many other school districts across the country, to make cybersecurity, or at the very least firewalls and some other network security devices, E-rate eligible. So that will increase our cybersecurity capabilities with still leveraging for every dollar we spend, we get $3.44. I think that's it. Okay, and the recommendations would be that, make sure I get this right. Well, the first thing I want to talk about is the $200 million emergency connectivity fund. So I wrote about that extensively. We've analyzed that data for not just our state, but for the whole country. Most of that money was used to buy laptops and tablets for student devices, and there is no sustainability plan. So the first thing I would be worried about there is that we get everyone together and talk about how we're going to make that sustainable. Just throwing the money at the districts and not figuring out how we're going to replenish those devices in 2025 or 2026 when they start to fail is important. And then the other thing is the flexibility and the funding. So the school connectivity fund not reverting is important because the way E-rate works, the schools apply in January. During the summer, the FCC decides how much they'll commit, and then over the next year, the funding goes out and the devices are installed. The problem with that is we're spanning 3 fiscal years and 2 calendar years. So having the funding revert in the middle is a problem. But we know that we're getting X dollars per 5-year budget cycle, and all that data is public record and available from the FCC website. So it's easy to audit. So it's not reverting that money would increase our capability to spend time actually solving problems instead of trying to meet deadlines to under short time. So that's my other.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. I just want to make one closing comment. Thank you so much, Ray. As I travel the state and I talk to our PSU technology directors, the number one things on their mind right now is what are we going to do in 4 and 5 years? So that's why that is one of our recommendations. Certainly, we have seen some chatter at the federal level about making sure cybersecurity things might be E-rate eligible. Right now, they are not. And also, what we're experiencing in North Carolina is being experienced across the nation. So it is something we need to go ahead and be planning for and talking about, and how we help our schools when they hit that 4 and 5 year mark to maintain what they've accomplished. I've shared this metric with you once before. I'll share it once again. In June of 2019, K-12 one-to-ones in our state were 14. That's a full K-12 one-to-one. In February of 2022, we had 108 K-12 one-to-ones. So that just gives you a little snippet of what that cliff could look like and why that is one of our recommendations. So thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, board members, Superintendent Truitt.
Thank you for an excellent report, and it's I think the board found this very informative, and it is. Let me ask, not now, not today, but you and Ms. Schaus get together on the non-reversion issues and report back to us on how we can make the best decisions to avoid the state reversion issue?
Yes, sir.
That would be, I think, very helpful and important.
You can do-
And we also are glad to listen to, at the same time, a plan for dealing with the technology deficit, because if whoever colleagues are here in 2025, 2026, that's a problem that we want to have prepared for, not just have all of a sudden occur like we didn't see it coming. So those would be very helpful if we could get some follow-up on that. All right,
Thank
any other questions? Yes.
I just wanted to make a quick comment if I could. So, thank you, Dr. Zeiss, for being here.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
You're good.
I'll do it, I got it. Today happens to be the birthday of Dr. Glenn Kleiman, who was the fearless leader for many years at the Friday Institute. And the initiative that you spoke about, Vanessa, that began 16 years ago, of course, began at the Friday Institute. And as you said, in 2018, we became the first state to have all public K-12 learning spaces connected to robust Wi-Fi. That's a huge accomplishment that spanned multiple political administrations, both sides of the aisle, real bipartisan effort. Another example of our state coming together to do what's right for kids. And on this day, Glenn Kleiman's birthday, I just wanted to say happy birthday, Glenn. I know you're in California, not listening right now, but we so appreciate the leadership of the FI and all of the General Assembly, Governor Bev Perdue, Governor McCrory, Lieutenant Governor Dan Forrest, for all of their work to create robust Wi-Fi in all K-12 learning spaces in our state.
Thank you.
Well said.
Yes, thank you for those comments. Even if they went over 30 seconds, they were worth it.
And Governor Cooper, sorry. Sorry.
And in that regard, let me echo to Ray Zeiss, our thanks to him and to his colleagues at the Friday Institute for the work that they do on our behalf to help.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right, anything else on this one? We go on then to action, our action item, this we talked about a lot, this is BizUp 5. This is a reminder, this was on both the EPS and the BizUp agenda last time. We agreed to have Dr. Tomlin come back with a suggested approach, and he is going to cut right to the quick on the suggested approach.
Yes, so the first 13 slides are for your review or edification if you need it, but right to the point of the allocation of the remaining funds. So as we discussed, program funding for the proposal that you approved was $1,065,637. We are recommending that we give additional continuation funds for this year only to the 13 continuing districts, and that is at $28,157 in addition to the $75 they're receiving. I did realize after I spoke with you last month that we did get some savings from the evaluation cost, and of course we want everything to go out to the districts if it can. So that's an additional $49,909. So for the one district that we recommended nominal funding for of $5,000, I am recommending that you give that $49,909 to them for this 1 year only. And then that brings our total to $1,436,678, and we spend all the funds that are available to us in this fiscal year.
This is a very Solomon-like way of going about it, I think. So it allows everyone to complain on an equal basis.
That's right.
Are there any questions? We spent a lot of time on this last time. Any questions or comments, or are we sanguine with this approach? Sounds like we're okay. All right, Dr. Tomlin, thank you. I'm sure you're delighted to be finished with this item. We have one consent item, BizOp 6. This is a school bus routing equivalent system. You will recall that we spent a lot of time several months ago, spent about 3 or 4 meetings to work out the equivalent system, which was pretty complicated, and work that out. This is a Guilford County request to be able to go to that system, and they're using an equivalent system that's already been approved previously, and we have approved by DPI. So unless anyone has any questions for Kevin Harrison about this, it's a consent agenda item. It's been pretty thoroughly vetted by the board in our own way as we've gone forward, and the equivalent methodology being used here has been previously vetted by DPI and approved. So that's this item. Kevin is still here, but I don't hear any call for him right now. On updates and contracts, you've got the executed contracts report and the planned contracts report. Have not heard any further questions about those this month. Also, the monthly budget report has been prepared and have not heard any follow-up on that. Alexis Schaus has hiked her way back to us, but has no additional report on this today. And so when we go back to the budget report, that'll be sometime in the future. But that now concludes our report, Chair Davis.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan, and that concludes our open session agenda items. We'll now move into closed session. I'll remind those who are listening that we'll not be returning to open session following closed session, but we'll adjourn immediately. But we will be returning at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning for our official meeting day. This time I ask for a motion to go into closed session. Vice Chair Duncan.
I move that we go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11A1, 3, and 6, to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Sections 115C-319 and -321 and 120-129 et cetera. To consider the qualifications, competence, performance, or conditions of appointment of public officers or employees or prospective public officers or employees, and to consult with our attorneys in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorneys and the public body, including a discussion of the following pending cases: M.W. versus CMS et al., Elliott versus DPI, O.M. versus Innovative School District, Phillips versus DPI, Cooper versus DPI.
Motion by Vice Chair Duncan. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Blackburn. Dr. Petrie Martin.
Dr. Oxenine,
Yes.
Mrs. Kamnitz.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers, Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mr. Blackburn,
Yes.
Dr. Ford, Treasurer Falwell, Lieutenant Governor Robinson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan,
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes. Let's be in closed session at 5:30.